Bound for Glory last night. We were teased going into Bound for Glory that we could see multiple surprises and certain ex-WWE superstars at the Bound for Glory event, with the likes of Impact Wrestling star Heath and other wrestlers teasing in interviews that we could see some surprises at the Bound for Glory pay-per-view, and we did. We got our fair share of surprises and returns to Impact Wrestling last night at Bound for Glory. So let's go through the main surprises and returns to the company that we saw last night. Now the first name, the majority actually, before I go into this, I was going to go straight into our first name there, but I think it's important to state that 3 of these returns happened in the Call Your Shot Gauntlet match, and that was always going to be the case. That was always going to be the case that we were going to see the surprises in that match. It's the Royal Rumble equivalent in Impact Wrestling that they've been doing for a couple of years now. So it always throws up a few surprises, a few debuts, a few returns. And that was exactly the same last night at their Bound for Glory event. So the first name that returned to Impact Wrestling last night was none other than Davari. Yes, Davari returned to Impact Wrestling during the Call Your Shot Gauntlet Battle Royal. He started off the match against Rhino. Of course, Rhino was the first competitor in the match. And he looks absolutely fantastic. He looked in absolutely great shape, phenomenal shape. This was, of course, not his first appearance of Impact Wrestling. He has actually appeared for Impact Wrestling in the past. This was his return to Impact Wrestling. Of course, he previously competed in Impact as Sheikh Abdul Bashir from 2008 to 2009. He's a former X Division champion, so his roots in Impact Wrestling do actually go quite deep. Now, he left the company after he got the pink slip in the Feast You're Fired match in 2009. Previously as well in Impact Wrestling, he was also a member of the World Elite faction with Eric Young as its leader. So there is certainly a lot of ties there when it comes to Davari's time in Impact Wrestling. Now, in recent years and in recent months, he was hired by WWE as a producer to work backstage with talent in putting together Raw, SmackDowns, and 205 live shows in January of 2019. However, he was amongst the producers and talent and employees released by the WWE on April 15th, 2020 as part of the budget cuts associated with the current COVID-19 pandemic. Now, in terms of his appearance last night at Impact Wrestling, is this going to be a full-time return for Davari at Impact, or is it a one-off kind of deal? If I had to speculate and if I had to guess, I would probably say I think it's likely that this is a one-time thing for Davari in Impact Wrestling. I will say that I thought he looked absolutely fantastic. There's no doubt that he can jump straight back into the ring and it would be absolutely no problem for him at all. There really wouldn't be. Could he be of use to Impact Wrestling right now? Of course he could. Of course he could be of use to Impact Wrestling. As I mentioned previously, in his previous role with the WWE, he was a producer. And he can still wrestle as well. He did an appearance for WWE. When was it? Was it back at the Greatest Royal Rumble? That first Saudi Arabia pay-per-view back in 2018? He was in the ring with his younger brother, Davari, in WWE. So absolutely he could be of use to Impact Wrestling right now. There's no doubt that he can still go. Look at his performance last night in the Gauntlet match. He looks great. He has experience. He has a ton of experience and he has a ton of talent. I think, though, that if Davari does stay around with Impact Wrestling, I think it's likely to be in a producer role, an agent role, similar to the role he had in WWE, as opposed to being an in-ring performer and an on-screen character. But we'll have to wait and see with that. He was obviously eliminated from the match by Brian Myers, and also, in assistance, he was eliminated by Brian Myers, and our next surprise return to Impact Wrestling, Swaggle. Yes, that's right. Swaggle returned to Impact Wrestling at Bound for Glory last night. The former WWE superstar Hornswoggle, if you're not familiar. Swaggle. Hornswoggle, wouldn't you know? It's easy. I love post WWE names for wrestlers. It's hilarious. It's so interesting whenever they come to pick their post WWE names, isn't it? But this was, of course, the second year in a row that Swaggle has competed in the Call Your Shot Gauntlet match at Bound for Glory for Impact Wrestling. He competed in last year's match at Bound for Glory in 2019. Now, after assisting Brian Myers, as I mentioned, in eliminating a previous return, Davari, he was eliminated by Brian Myers himself. Now, of course, both men, Brian Myers and Swaggle, in real life are very close friends. He's very close to the likes of Zack Ryder, the Good Brothers, and to be honest, a lot of guys in professional wrestling. Anyone that's worked with Swaggle in the past, whether it is in WWE or Impact Wrestling, just knows what a great guy he is. And his career in professional wrestling, for the adversities that he has faced in life, for the amount that he's done in professional wrestling, whether good or bad, whatever you think about him and his gimmick, he's always done fantastic. He's done absolutely fantastic. And of course, this wasn't his first appearance for Impact Wrestling. Now, I mentioned he's appeared in multiple Call Your Shot Gauntlet matches for Impact Wrestling at Bound for Glory now, but Swaggle also made numerous appearances for Impact Wrestling in the past. On the December 15, 2016 episode of Impact, which was the total non-stop deletion episode with the Broken Hardy universe taking over Impact Wrestling, Swaggle made an appearance as the partner of Rockstar Spud in the tag team Apocalypto match. This would then lead to Swaggle facing off against the likes of Lashley, in which he knocked himself out in an attempted spear on Lashley. He then continued this feud with Rockstar Spud. He actually defeated Rockstar Spud, the now Drake Maverick in WWE and NXT, on an episode of Impact in 2017, whereby the loss caused Rockstar Spud to quit Impact Wrestling. Later on in their feud, you see Swaggle attack Rockstar Spud using a hammer. This led to Rockstar Spud attacking Swaggle with a hammer. Just great stuff. I think it's stuff that is forgotten about. I loved the comedic stuff that Swaggle and Rockstar Spud did in Impact Wrestling. I think it's almost forgotten about, isn't it? You know, that was the thing I always said about Drake Maverick, and they're starting to do it now with Killian Dane and Drake Maverick in NXT, is you forget, and I know he did it with the 24/7 championship stuff, but I thought that was only tip of the iceberg. Drake Maverick's comedic timing, Rockstar Spud's comedic timing is unbelievable. It is incredible. It is so good. That's not biased from me being a fellow Brit. He really is that good when it comes to the comedic stuff. So I'm glad to see him doing more of it in WWE now. But an important factor in that was Swaggle too. So I think it was nice to see a cameo from Swaggle last night at Bound for Glory. Now, he left the company, was officially removed from the company Impact Wrestling in November of 2017. Reportedly at the time when he was doing this stuff with Rockstar Spud and doing the stuff with Lashley and all that kind of stuff, Swaggle didn't have a contract. I don't think he has a contract now with Impact Wrestling. In fact, I'm fairly certain that he doesn't. Again, when you discuss about this cameo last night in the Call Your Shot Gauntlet match, the same with Davari, is this a full-time return? Is this a one-off? Again, I would lean more to the one-off thing. I think Swaggle, you look at all of his appearances he makes now, whether it's for Impact, whether it's for WWE, whether it's on an independent show, they're very likely to be cameos and one-offs. So I think it's a one-off. I wouldn't rule out Swaggle appearing again, maybe in an upcoming taping if he's in town kind of deal, but I think Swaggle, it's a one-off. It's a one-off. But I think it's always fun to see Swaggle in these cameos. And look, he's a name, and he still does have stuff to offer in limited appearances. So I don't have a problem with that in the slightest. Now, the next name returning, arguably the biggest return of the night, especially in this Call Your Shot Gauntlet match, was the Cowboy James Storm. Yes, James Storm is back in Impact Wrestling, former TNA World Heavyweight Champion, former anything champion in Impact Wrestling. This guy is synonymous with TNA, Impact Wrestling. He is a TNA original, and it was great to see James Storm return. Now, he returned last night, once again, in the Call Your Shot Gauntlet Battle Royal. He joined the match, he spit beer in the face of AC Romero, he eliminated Larry D. He was actually in the final 4 competitors left in the match along with Heath, Rhino and Sami Callihan. Now, he was actually eventually eliminated by Sami Callihan. And I know this is almost becoming a bit of a repetitive statement from myself because I've said it a few times here, but he looked in absolutely fantastic shape. Now, that wasn't actually a surprise to me because I've seen him in multiple recent interviews talking about his potential opportunities with WWE, and he spoke about getting into the shape of his life in preparation for this run that he was going to have with WWE. But we'll touch on that in a second. Now, James Storm, I think, is still technically under contract with the NWA. He is still currently one half of the NWA World Tag Team Champions with Eli Drake. But I will say it was... how great was it? How great was it to see James Storm back in an Impact Wrestling ring? I think, you know, those TNA originals, regardless of who they are, whether it's AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, James Storm, whoever, I'm missing out a million, obviously. It's just always great to see them back under the Impact Wrestling banner, under the TNA banner, because they built the company. You know, forget about the guys coming in from WWE, forget about the legends coming in and all this sort of stuff. Those guys really did build that company up, and it was fantastic to see James Storm back, even if it is a one night only thing. I thought he looked phenomenal and he did a great job. The TNA originals, they just belong with the company. They just belong with the company, and he has really done it all with Impact Wrestling. He's a 14-time, 1-4, right? He's a 14-time tag team champion with Impact Wrestling. 7 times he is an NWA World Tag Team Champion under the Impact Wrestling banner. He's a 7-time TNA World Tag Team Champion under in TNA. He's a former TNA King of the Mountain champion, and of course a former TNA World Heavyweight champion when he beat Kurt Angle back in, what was that, 2011? I think he beat him on an episode of Impact Wrestling. And it just sort of rounds off just what a fascinating 2020 it's been for James Storm. It's what a 2020 he's had, by the way, and what an interesting 2020 he was meant to have. Because you look at his year, he starts off the year with the NWA, he's on NWA Power every week on YouTube, becomes one half of the NWA World Tag Team Champions with Eli Drake. Then around this time, around January, February time, he is then contacted by WWE because they wanted him to do a Royal Rumble appearance, a Royal Rumble cameo. He said it couldn't happen because he was working with NWA at the time, but then the plans were altered and changed, and James Storm was set to make his WWE debut after WrestleMania on the Monday Night Raw brand. The contracts were signed, everything was ready to go. James Storm was already training, getting into the shape of his life. That's why he looks the way he does now. The contracts were signed. He was doing his own physicals to ensure that he would pass WWE's rigorous testing. Paul Heyman had multiple conversations with James Storm. Paul Heyman was reportedly really, really high on the Cowboy and wanted him on Monday Night Raw. And then, I mean, this is the story of 2020, isn't it? The pandemic happens and everything changed. Everything changed. Everything with James Storm and WWE got delayed. Everything got put on hold. He said that in an interview, I believe it was with Ryan Satin, when Ryan Satin was still with Pro Wrestling Sheet. He said that the last time he had spoken to anyone in WWE was back in July, and he hasn't heard that from them since. The deal is obviously off, and the deal is obviously dead due to the pandemic, but also you have to look at the other factors involved in that. One, the pandemic, and hiring people is different, bringing people in is different. Two, Paul Heyman is no longer in charge of the Raw creative. He's no longer the executive director of Monday Night Raw. That change happened in around, was that June time, so that's around the same time that James Storm last heard from WWE, so that makes a lot of sense. So after all that, he's still under contract with the NWA, and now he makes an appearance with Impact Wrestling at Bound for Glory in October. So what a wild year. What a wild year for James Storm. So what I will say, it was awesome to see him back. Absolutely brilliant to see him back under the Impact Wrestling umbrella. Was this a one-time deal or was this full-time? I don't know. I think this is a lot more complex than the Davari appearance. It's a lot more complex, obviously, than the Swaggle appearance. So who knows? It certainly felt to me like it was more than just a cameo. James Storm doing a one-off appearance with the company he has so much history with just doesn't feel like that would just happen and then he would disappear. Now, yes, he does still have ties with the NWA, but I think getting out of that contract isn't a big deal. The NWA have been very open about talents taking outside bookings. If they want their release, then they'll get that. Eddie Kingston is a great example of this. So James Storm theoretically could come back to Impact, and I really, really hope he does. I think, look, James Storm and Impact Wrestling, they go hand in hand. Impact Wrestling is his home. The WWE situation with him earlier this year absolutely sucks because I would have loved to have seen him get his shot. Now, would that have gone well? Look, history and logic says probably not. You look at the likes of EC3 and others where it just didn't work for them there, and he might have got creatively frustrated, and Eric Young's another great example of it just not working there. But you never know, and you want to take that opportunity. You want to go to the big dance, you want to go to the big stage, and he never got that opportunity, and I hope he still does. But I said this when Eric Young returned to Impact, and it's the same case here when it comes to James Storm. James Storm has spent the majority of his career with Impact Wrestling. There is so much history there. Impact has all of the majority of his career pretty much on tape. All of that footage they own. So to me, I think of the production and I think of the stories and I think of all of it. I think of the stories that Impact Wrestling can tell when it comes to James Storm. I think of all of the drama they can create when it comes to James Storm and the great things that they can do. And I spoke about this earlier today when I did the video about the title changes at Bound for Glory. And I spoke about Rich Swann becoming the world champion. And I questioned, who is the top babyface in Impact Wrestling? And that's a really difficult question to answer. I don't think they have one. If James Storm came back, he absolutely could be their top babyface in the company. Yes, he has miles on the clock, but he can still go. He still looks great and he's a name. So I hope that it's more than just a one-off appearance. I'm sure we'll find out in the coming days as we have Impact Wrestling on Access TV and the upcoming television tapings happen. Now, finally, And the last return to Impact Wrestling we saw last night at Bound for Glory was, of course, Su Yung returning to Impact Wrestling television. Now, obviously, she had been Susie for a while now with Kylie Rae. But not only did Su Yung return to Impact Wrestling, but she also became the Knockouts champion. She replaced Kylie Rae in the match against Deonna Purrazzo. If you want to know my thoughts about all of that, we did a video earlier today talking about the title changes at Bound for Glory and essentially the bait and switch. But Su Yung returned last night. I don't know if she's fully dropped the Susie character. We'll have to wait and see. Of course, only a couple of weeks ago, it was Deonna Purrazzo versus Susie at Victory Road. Deonna Purrazzo defeated Susie and broke her arm. So it felt like it was inevitable that Su Yung was going to return tonight. I felt like she was going to return rather at Bound for Glory and just attack Kylie Rae and maybe cost her the Knockouts Championship. That isn't the case. Instead, she replaced Kylie Rae and she's won the championship from Deonna Purrazzo, which was surprising. Now, we know that Kylie Rae reportedly did not appear at Bound for Glory due to injury. It's an injury that isn't, by all accounts, serious, according to the likes of Brian Alvarez. Apparently, according to PW Insider, she wasn't even backstage last night. So, that's an annoying situation. I didn't like the bait and switch. I thought Impact Wrestling handled that wrong. But Su Yung, I'm glad to see her back on television. I'm excited to see where this story goes with Su Yung and Deonna Purrazzo, and how does Kylie Rae factor into this when she comes back. There's a lot there. There's a lot there to break down, so I'm very excited about that. But of course, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on the surprises and returns last night at Bound for Glory? Let me know your favourite return or surprise in the comment section below, and I'll be sure to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys and chatting about Impact Wrestling here on the channel. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button as well. It really just helps out here on YouTube. Go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestling News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video, along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.